Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Sharon Bown, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1, Joanne Davey. We are honoured to acknowledge Lieutenant Commander Anwar and his accompanying delegation. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, would you now please stand and join in singing the national anthem? Those requiring a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that would ensure and help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Flight Sergeant Lewis Havelock Christmas. Lewis Christmas, known as Havelock, was born on the 13th of November 1917 in northern Western Australia to Lewis and Mary Christmas. Growing up, he had a younger brother, Cecil. Their father was a labourer. Lewis attended Rivervale State School, Perth Boys School and Guildford Grammar School. He was a member of his school cadets and was fond of tennis, cricket, rugby union and golf. After leaving school, he worked as an engineering salesman and a press agent for Tate's business agency. On the 7th of October 1940, Christmas enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force, aged 22. He was accepted into the permanent forces the following year and trained as an observer and navigator. He received his Air Observer's badge in August 1942, a month before being made sergeant. Christmas embarked for overseas service from Melbourne on the 2nd of November 1942, arriving in the United Kingdom in December. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,500 RAAF pilots, navigators, wireless operators, air gunners and flight engineers who, throughout the course of the war, joined Royal Air Force squadrons or Australian squadrons based in Britain. Further specialist training followed in England, and in March 1943, Christmas was promoted to Flight Sergeant. In September, he was posted to number 106 Squadron and 2 months later transferred to number 463 Squadron. As part of Bomber Command, number 463 Squadron flew the 4-engined Avro Lancaster heavy bomber. On the night of the 28th of January, Bomber Command launched a major bombing raid on Berlin. Flight Sergeant Christmas was a bomb aimer on board Lancaster JOS, which took off from the Royal Air Force Base at Waddington shortly after midnight on the 29th. In an attempt at a diversion, the target was initially bombed by a few Mosquito aircraft before the major force arrived. However, this resulted in an alert enemy, and the German fighters met the incoming aircraft in Danish airspace. Christmas's aircraft was still on its way to Berlin when it was likely damaged. The pilot had turned in an attempt to head back to England when the aircraft collided with an oncoming Lancaster for number 83 Squadron, RAF. Both crashed near the village of Miel on the island of Al off the east coast of Denmark, more than 500 kilometres away from the target. There were no survivors. Those killed in the crash with Flight Sergeant Lewis Christmas were Australians Flight Lieutenant Norman Cooper and Pilot Officer George Kerr, along with British Sergeants Francis Bull, Ronald Grist and Frederick Robson, and Canadian Flight Sergeant Harold Southers. They were buried at Arbenvad Cemetery on the Danish mainland. After the war, the remains of Commonwealth servicemen buried in Europe were examined and identified where possible. The remains of Christmas and his crew were exhumed and identified. They were reinterred at Arbenvad Cemetery, and Christmas rests there under the inscription, "His duty fearlessly and nobly done, ever remembered." He was 26 years old. Havelock Christmas was dearly missed by his family and friends, who placed in memoriam notices in the newspapers for years after his death. One, inserted by his parents, included the following: "He trod the way to sacrifice, forever young and gay, with face uplifted to the sun, not faltering on the way." Another from his brother contained a line from a poem by Bartlett Adamson, which read, "They taught the world what men there be." Cecil Christmas also enlisted in the Second World War and served as a flying officer in the RAAF. He survived the war. Flight Sergeant Lewis Christmas's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, along with some 40,000 others from the Second World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flight Sergeant Lewis Havelock Christmas, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.